Welcome to the December 16th Jalen Zones production user call. We have Jan, Philip, Jamie, Daniel, and myself, Michael, so far. And Philip brought up Why You Know Host, which is a neat application store, presumably based on Docker, that gives small organizations a bunch of essential applications. I put the links in the document. But as we discussed this prior to the recording, I brought up the topic of seriously, what production user will actually trust a third-party app store? And having looked at a VM store during the call, I see, oh, you can get FreeBSD 14 as a VM. Great, that's a little out of date. So Daniel was launching into his observations on what structures and strategies and policies would make any of us trust an app store. Let it rip, Daniel.
Right. So I think the maybe not consensus, but I think something we all tend towards is not wanting to run App Store stuff in production per se. But there are a lot of applications that don't actually matter, like for experimentation with
Hmm.
the expectation that you're not really getting security and that you want to do an iterative testing. So so I looked at why you know host, and something that I noticed is that Michael, you and I, we've have these moments in the last several years where we're like, hey, what about this app? What about this app?
Hmm.
And then I spin it up on a jail. Now that's not a ton of work, even without something like Bastille. And I don't use Bastille only because the at the time that I was using it, the jail support was I'm sorry, the ZFS support was, sort of clunky. And then was experimenting with netgraph, and there were just a few bumps in the road. So I ended up just doing jailconf, which of course keeps getting better and better. Um, so that plus a ZFS clone plus package install plus whatever's on GitHub get you there pretty fast, and that does it is a little more effort than an app store, but it also naturally provide some guardrails while you're doing it. Like what software is going on it. I mean, you don't know what the scripts you're doing, I guess, but it I don't know. It feels better to know, okay, well, this is all of these particular dependencies. But that said, I mean, for those things that I mentioned with you and me, Michael, when we're like,
Yeah, looking at
should
you,
we
Odoo. Go ahead. That was
yeah,
the one.
exactly. Odoo and we hedge doc, and which we had to sort of pick between what are the good collaborative editors versus what are the good wikis. I ended
Bingo.
up using for the Zelta documentation. Ended up using JS Wiki, which was one of the things that we were looking at, but it doesn't have the collaborative editing. I think they were
Bingo.
threatening to set it up, but but there are these situations where I do reach for Docker because I need to try six competing apps, anything LLM, LobeChat, like which of these dumb LLM tools is going to have the best, you know, uh, options. And unfortunately, a lot of these things, it ends up that it's Docker only. Like
Hmm.
you can't even really build it. I mean, it's the build instructions are basically for the maintainers and nobody else. Um, but yeah, I guess my long story short, I would definitely welcome an app store. I've always had this fantasy of having a FreeBSD centric app store where you just get a ZFS replication stream of a fully functioning jail,
Hmm.
with some standards on how to do it, and then you can really get updates deltas. Like that would be insane. Like, could you imagine how cool it would be if, I mean, risky as hell, but how cool would it be if uh if we could do block level updates the way that Docker does it. So Docker, they can brag about their 100 megabyte upgrade updates, and we can, brag about our, tens, as we pop up updates. But we would have to agree on this is where the user stuff goes, and this is where the system stuff goes. To do something like that. But boy, that would be
Yeah.
amazing. I mean, Jan, your jail system, this isn't one of the use cases that I've thought of before, but Like that would be like it is designed to put everything in boxes and to use package base to install just the components that you actually need.
And none of these
So
people
I
should
don't
be
know.
release engineers and including half an OS or all of an OS in their little thing to do the thing. So yeah,
Right.
so
So
Yeah.
Jan's approach is great. Go ahead.
the thing is, yes, with package base, you can easily install a base system and you can subset it so that there's a between 100 and 200 megabytes per thick jail with, LZ4 compression in ZFS, which I assume will be always on. Otherwise, add another 50 to 80%. But you can get a FreeBSD based system which feels complete to an application, not to a developer, but to an application and its user. So man pages are there. You can get rid of the 1 to 200 megabytes, depending on your definition of complete and how much tinkering you're willing to do. Then other thing you can do is you can go a few steps further and use what I demonstrated at your BSDCon and actually take these stripped down systems and then build thin provision jails with ZFS clones on top of that. That way you can get the storage requirement per jail down to single digit megabytes or even into the kilobytes, um, depending on how much changes you need per instance and configurations, certificates, whatever you need. Um, The important part to make that work, I've found, is you have to break the parent-child relationship between CFS datasets because your base image will be the root file system of the jail. And that root file system of the jail has to be immutable and you have to be able to update it. So if your persistent data, let's say the files and database of your Nextcloud, are on a child data set. Now you've an annoying problem to solve, which, yes, you can rename the child out of the way, destroy the parent, and move it back under a new parent. But that song and dance routine is very annoying and hard to properly automate. And you will see confusing intermediate states. I found it's much easier to instead unmount all the file system of the jail while it's down, then never have that parent-child relationship, and instead just have a flat list of jail file systems under an unmountable container. So you create a ZFS file system with can mount equals off and the mount point to slash jail's name of your jail, just to act as a container for all your other file systems. And then you create your real file systems, either clones or normal persistent file systems under there and assign them a mount point property so that they are mounted into the right location, but are not um, in a parent-child relationship, but they're all siblings in the ZFS dataset tree. Because of that, you have no dependency when you destroy a single dataset. You destroy a single dataset, which does not depend on any children to be moved out of the way
So
before you
getting
destroy.
from the implementation details back to the
Hmm?
policies of how do we have a store we actually trust? How, do we even, dare we say, trust the ports as they are, regardless of them being packaged up for everybody for your easy use? I mean, are you Apache users building Apache from source just because, hey, or do you have full faith in FreeBSD ports and packages?
But the port is not really that much policy because the job of the port is to build and install the software, not configure it. But this kind of point and click adventure sysadmin interface has to bring a lot of opinions and policy. And that's where experienced operators disagree.
Yep.
So you can't make it correct for everyone. You have to trust people to have the experience with the application you want. Which, yeah,
So does that mean there is progress or not?
it means that technically you can do it today with Podman. Just
Okay.
upload it all to Docker Hub
Yep.
as an OCI image and install it.
There you
It's
go. Okay.
usable
There's your answer, Philip.
today. You would just have to have your own OCI container registry, upload it to it, add a little fluff to it to make it look like the Why You Know Host website, and call it a day. The find an application user interface is good on this site. So if you look at the applications, you can just pick applications, explore the catalog, browse all, you pick an application, yeah, and you would just click on it
And
in
have a
the
nice
web
day. Here's the
web interface.
repo.
So you would have something like you can your wrapper around Podman or some other container runtime, or just jail.conf if you build it like that. But then you would have to do a bit more work on your own, but it would integrate nicer with FreeBSD. Yeah.
Yay.
But you could just effectively make the App Store a Git repository with one sub module per application, and then synchronize it like that and have a web interface for that. Jail.conf is expressive enough to do that these days.
Okay.
So that you have one jail.conf for the host. It includes all the managed jail.confs. You can have your own normal ones too if you want. And everything is just every installed or every instance of an installed application becomes a jail. Maybe each version of it becomes its own jail, so that you can have kind of a thick installation of the application, and then you instantiate thin provision jails from that. That's all fine.
There you go. Ship it. Sounds good. And I
No,
don't know
it's
if our
not
friends
shippable.
say
It's a
DCH and Doug are planning to do something, but
uh,
we can keep asking the
I,
question for another few years.
the problem is that you need more work per application than a pod maintainer provides.
Hmm.
So someone has to stay on top of things. Maybe write migrations so that you can just click an upgrade button and hope it works. It should create snapshots around upgrades so that you can even revert the application if an
Oh
upgrade
yeah,
fails.
good point.
So you snapshot everything and you can roll back to some snapshot of your instance
Yep.
if it fails.
Yep.
And then you can report the problem without being down, right? If you put a load balancer in front of everything HTTP like, you can also make it so that you can kind of look, put, I don't know, HTTP basic authentication in front of every application while it's in maintenance, so that only the operator can actually interface with Nextcloud while you're in a maintenance window. So you put it in a maintenance window that creates a snapshot, then you do the upgrade, and then you do a test if it works, and then you take it out of maintenance mode, and
Hmm.
then everyone can access it again, and you remove the restriction to only these users via HTTP basic auth.
Hmm.
This kind of so that you can do some kind of fencing logic at the load balancer. And the load balancer would be just one more managed jail. This is all
And what
doable,
about a
but it's a
fancy reverse
lot
proxy
of
in front?
boring, tedious work. Sorry, what?
And what about a fancy reverse proxy in front that
Yeah,
you might have
the
for a
load
few
balancer I just mentioned is
applications?
a reverse proxy.
Okay.
It would be something like HA proxy, traffic. I guess you could do it with Nginx, but the open source community version of Nginx doesn't export all the statistics you want out of a proper load balancer. So my first try would be to use HA proxy. That is too annoying to script. Maybe look into the cloud native stuff, container first stuff like traffic,
How's
which I
traffic
haven't
spelled?
had
Is
to do.
it with clever spelling?
Intentionally confusing.
Yeah, okay, good. With a K or a silent
Yeah,
H?
of course.
Okay.
And otherwise, it wouldn't be fancy enough to get
Okay.
proper funding, right?
You go. Other thoughts, observations, clever solutions, because hey, we can just keep talking about this and hope for that app store and reminisce about the early days of FreeNAS. Oh,
So
One
oh,
idea that was just
God, it's word than I expected. Traffic. Go ahead.
well, one idea that was brought
Yeah.
up in this was the immutable file system and thin jails, and that sounds like a really neat combination that I hadn't really delved into yet, where you'd have the base jail being a stepwise upgrade. So let's say, 15.0, 15.1, et cetera, for the base jail, and all the rest of the applications would be thin provisioned jails that are relying on a specific version of the underlying jail. So version 15.0, 15.1, et cetera. And so they
even
could
better.
be very small push out, and you'd have three data sets, one for the immutable application, one for configuration, and one for user data.
I do it a bit differently in my prototype. I have one for each patch level of the base system in production. So you have a
Oh, okay.
14.3 patch level 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. Base, which is kept read only, so that you don't accidentally modify something. That's snapshotted. Then you have each version of your application as a kind of hybrid mode. The base system is immutable, but and then you clone the base system into your application. You install the application, you snapshot that, and only once you have both your installed packages snapshotted and your base system snapshotted, you combine those into a truly thin provision jail where the application is cloned in and the base system is cloned in. It all gets mounted. And then you run that and you potentially, possibly for every non-trivial application, you would have to have some persistent data file system, and that belongs into the instance. But the instance configuration, let me show you how that looks. I will take over the share for a moment. Let's hope I picked the right. Can you see that?
Yeah.
So, so now I stop that jail. Uh, what's this? Okay, it's just bullshit. Okay, sorry, I have some stuff in there which shouldn't be there. Prototyping stuff, but okay, that's a lot better. So now, for example, here's my version file.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
if I want to go back one version, or and I start the jail again, we now scroll up. We can see that one of the exec.prepare steps of this jail ran a shell script which took the specification which got included via wildcards and found out that, oh, this clone here um, is out of sync with the specified one because, oh, I have a 14.3 patch level 5 and I'm supposed to have a patch level 4. So it destroyed the old clone, created a new clone, and kept the valid clones of Nginx and uh, so the application. And now if I do this and stop the jail, nothing interesting happens. I just stop Nginx and release doesn't do anything. It's just so it produces output. And then I unmount the file system. And if I start the jail again, now it's upgraded again.
That's really cool.
And let me destroy it again, just to prove how that everything is out of that everything is easily reproduced from the specification. So ZFS list grab. Here we have the file systems. I hope you have a proper screen because I have to make the terminal a bit larger so that it fits. Because yes, I'm sorry I used UUIDs here. It's the least bad thing I had, which is easy to automate. I want to do it better, but this is a prototype. Um, okay, now I have this. And if I just go in here and do a ZFS destroy-rv on this dataset, I have now destroyed all the datasets of the jail. And if I start it again, you can see that, oh, it found that it had to create a clone. Um, the jail gets its own permanently allocated DefFS rule set number. I found out that the rule set is already loaded into the kernel, so nothing to do here. Then it creates the real file system for the jail. Again, let me make that a little wider. So /10 for varlog and so on. Needs a bunch of file systems to make the rc.d scripts content. If not exactly happy with what I'm doing, but it works. It doesn't yell at you loudly. Then I mount all of these file systems. Then I mount the device file system and the file descriptor file system. And I mount a tempfs because now if you look into the jail, something quite unusual uh, as a foot, I have /etc and user local etc mounted as tempfs. On every start, my jail.conf will mount a tempfs populated by going through the mount mfs mount command through the fs tab, and then copy both the currently configured base and the currently configured application configuration directory, and then apply changes to that on every turn. So it's faster to just populate a tiny tempfs of a few kilobytes. So if we do a df h-t tempfs, you can see that it's 3 MB and a few kilobytes. So memory consumption is not a problem on a ZFS system, I assume. for that. And that means that /etc and user local etc are always writable but ephemeral. So on every jail start, I start by copying from the origin. Um, so I'm cloning it. I have my cloned file system. I use the clone file system to populate the tempfs, but the tempfs is then customized on every start. So for example, add a user, enable a service, and then the jail is started. The advantage of this is that you can modify it. So if something wants to mess around with /etc, like for example, you have a VNet enable jail and it needs to write the etc resolve conf, it can do that. But it also means you will intentionally lose all changes on every jail shutdown, which keeps you honest because your automation is all that customizes /etc on the next start. So you can't have long-lived divergence from the specification. Does that make sense?
Does it answer your
Oh, yeah.
question?
Yeah, that seems like a really cool way to do it, that everything in the automation is what's doing the customization, and you have a snapshot that's basically immutable until you take an incremental intentional step.
No, it's truly immutable. So the file systems are mounted read-only. It's not basically, it is truly immutable. The only thing which isn't are the persistent volumes in Docker speak or normal ZFS file systems in FreeBSD speak. Just that the data set name is ugly and it has an explicitly configured mount point.
Alrighty. Anything
For
else,
example, the
everybody?
specification looks a bit like this. So here is, for example,
Wait,
the RC. Sorry?
well, I think the other question I have, since Daniel's on the phone, is there a way that Zelta can tie into pushing out ZFS data sets in kind of a programmatic way instead of just backup and restore, which is what I've been tinkering with?
So, so what do you mean? Like
So,
for like
so
I guess the circumstances, yeah. I mean, I'm comparing data set, data set replicas, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I can't do a three-way, like I don't know. Well, tell me more. Tell me more what you're thinking.
okay, so my idea is, instead of just installing software manually and doing all the fun stuff with that, is there a way to push out a package that incrementally updates a version, not just from one place, but let's say I have software version one, and that gets installed however it gets installed. But then let's say there's version two that comes out. Can you push that out to, say, 10 or 100 different installations when they want to pull it as as a ZFS clone or ZFS replication? Pulling that in to say I want to upgrade from version one to two, and sort of like a Git pull, um, but a Zelta pull. You know what I mean? Does that
Yeah.
make
So I think the trick is the application would have to be contained. So there are some things in like the FreeBSD
You just cut out there. Sorry to
ports
say.
collection that are like the ubiquity server is pretty much a bottle, right? It's all self-contained, and like it has its own um, mono uh, MongoDB server in it and stuff like that. So for stuff like that, then yeah, that could be possible, and I think it would be really useful for some of the gnarlier packages like like GitLab. GitLab is just a tangled web of Ruby and Rake commands, and getting it one version, just getting it to the point that you can run the database upgrade uh, command is tough. So yeah, I mean, I would love that. I mean, that's basically, that's basically my long-term dream with this stuff. I will say that Clara, or actually, no, I don't know if Clara does it currently, but Scale Engine does their entire systems like that. They keep a immutable FreeBSD, and they update it with snapshots. This is, as far as I know, has not been upstreamed, but yeah, all of their FreeBSD installs are from scratch. And then if you want to patch to version whatever, it's just it's just a sync on the read only. Uh, yeah, you could just sync the whole thing up. So it's being done in the wild. Uh, just just I think this the tricky part would be coming up with a formula for how it works. I mean, one thing I could try is just do it to some of the ports that are out there that sort of follow this structure, where it's basically a user local share directory with a binary that points to it, and then it's all self-contained. And there are a few packages like that, and you could definitely do it. And of course, they're the worst packages. I mean, not the worst, like the hardest ones to deal with, and to upgrade are the ones that would benefit the most from something like this.
Hmm.
Um,
Um,
Yeah, I mean, Zelta
so
wouldn't be necessary for that, but it would help because it would, be able to tell you what version you're on and which one you want to get to and stuff like that.
one of the
That would be fun.
so one of
Delta
the prob
2.1.
Yeah.
one of the problems with this kind of approach of using CFS for this is that you either must do it absolutely correctly and never store anything you want to preserve in a clone. So effectively, that's what I'm doing. I'm keeping the clones in my prototype read only, with only one exception, which is also the reason why I'm using clones and not nullFS, and that is that the clones can be made writable to create directories for mount points.
Right.
So the requirement is, if you want to mount something, you have to have the directory in the file system you're mounting into. And if that file system is read only, you're out of luck.
Yeah.
Um, with a clone, during my cloning step and file system creation step, I will make the clone writable before anything other than the dataset management code runs in the jail. Create an empty directory and make it read only again. That way, yes, I have a tiny local modification in my clone, but it's not one I care to preserve, because if it's missing, I will recreate it identically on the next jail start. So
Right.
my clones are still what I would consider stateless for operational reasons. Stateless.
Yeah, and
That's
a,
what you
and a,
can already do.
and an
But
update doesn't. Oh, go ahead.
if you do that, you can have your application package set, which you then ship as, for example, a replication stream or some other exchange format. Could be a simple tarball, could be an OCI compatible tarball, could be anything you want. Could be a, I don't know, it could be a UDF read only file system image. Whatever works for your use case. But with this design, you can actually upgrade that because you don't care to preserve the changes, because there are no meaningful changes. The alternative is something like what OCI taught us, is to use, or you could argue abuse, ZFS diff to find the modified files between different layers to build up an OCI image. And by using ZFS diff, you can find the files which modified between the snapshot you just created and the starting point, and then only collect those files as an overlay. This would be a kind of user space ZFS rebase, so that let's say you have your fig jail, you snapshot it, you clone it, and you allow the clone to diverge. Well, with this approach, you could then find all the files which diverged and create a new clone and copy those files back in, with the assumption that if you're treating it well, the set should be fairly bounded, not grow
Well,
out of
yeah,
control
and
over
what you're
time.
yeah, what you're describing actually would Zelta would make that a lot easier because it has a revert and a rotate function that
Yes.
I'll be adding for
But,
for the Jingle Bells
so
this year. And
so
yeah,
if
so you can very easily it definitely democratizes the ability to just like point at a data set and say, just go back to this snapshot, make a clone, and then I should probably have a thing that just shows you the diff, right away. And then
using the
you could
diff between your clone's origin and a snapshot, your automation would create enables you to kind of implement a rebase. So you could say something like find all the files which have been modified, added, or removed compared to the origin of the clone and apply the same changes to a different clone. That
oh my
way you
gosh.
and if you have ZFS block cloning on your pool, this would
Hmm.
even be a very fast and pretty efficient operation because you would just do one copy file range to do a copy on write of the modified files.
I'm putting Zelta rebase on my to do. That is awesome. I love that idea.
Yeah,
That
because then
is
you can have thin jails which you can treat as thick jails, and as long as you don't always use it. So if you create your clone jail and you run a package, a base system previously updated it or something like that, okay, now you've modified a lot of stuff. But if instead you rebase it to the new version of previously for each patch level, then you never have the problem that your jail is giant, and you could offer some kind of surgery like exclude files or something like this, do a package rich or whatever, package query to get the paths by package, and if the file is installed by a base package, for example, you would just ask, hey, how about I override these files and don't forward migrate them? So that would be fairly simple. You do a package query against origin looks like base slash. Uh, if you have package base, it should give you a fairly good list of files. Yeah, to keep the
nice.
diff small.
That's actually very exciting. I'm definitely going to implement that. That's really fun because I think that could be yeah, because I mean I think that the cool thing about the rotate, which just does a rename and reclone with the deltas, and then revert, which is just rename and clone in place, which is what we all do all the time when we're doing recovery, and making that really easy is one of my goals. But one of the things that came out of this is that it's really nice for creating development environments because you can take a whole database, doesn't matter how many terabytes it is, and then you can, rewind for the last couple of days, like the last week, and get to your version of the database from, you know, uh, Monday through Friday of last week for only the cost of the deltas there. So I think, and that's great for complex block level stuff, but for file stuff, a rebase tool would be really fun. I mean,
Yes, it would be a
that would be
great
great.
workflow to have. It someone bothered to implement it, is
Yeah.
a ZFS rebase at the block level is basically impossible to
Hmm.
do because I would assume it would be equivalent to implementing 99.9 something percent of block pointer rewriting.
Yeah, that
But
would be
if you do um, the rebasing by with snapshots in user space of just copying the files around, that would work.
all right. Well,
I
that's my
I guess you
BSD CAN
could.
lightning talk.
I
That's
guess if you
that's
wanted to be really, really fancy and clever about, you could try to take the diff and then generate a fake replication stream you could apply
mhm.
to the new file system. But uh, it's probably a lot easier to do what OCI tar does. The code is in Rust and fairly easy to follow, so it was easy for me to find the bug all of like 2 years ago, which made the OCI tar archives be non-compliant and explode in size because every time a directory is modified, OCI tar, because of this little bug, will add the whole directory recursively instead of just adding it once.
Oh,
They're using tar, so OCI tar calls the FreeBSD base system tar, and you just have to change the flags. It's that simple of a modification, which is why I didn't write a patch for it because I thought, hey, patching the Rust code is probably best if Michael does it. But now that
he's
he has
under new
stopped working
lead
on that
ownership.
because he decided he yeah
His employer
he
might not
needs to
allow it. So,
yeah
if
exactly
it's a
his
simple fix,
employer
maybe
is
take a peek, please. He might accept it, but he
the
probably
project
can't.
is effectively dead because of that. The whole XC command from like
Oh,
three
well, yeah, his thing, but this was one utility useful among
exactly, and that utility could be extracted from a repository. Does it
extract
have a
away.
license? Yeah, it's
So
just 2 class BSD, so
there you
you could
go.
just take it out, and just keep OCI tar around and fix
You
that. That
could
would be
be
pretty simple.
done before the conversation's over. Like two
Uh,
clicks. Click, 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 click.
um, yeah,
Just
just
saying.
fork OCI tar, turn it into a port. But it's only the turning it into a tar. It wouldn't be the extra step of doing it in such a way that you use block cloning to reduce the storage requirement. And the nice thing is, if you use it as part of a jail workflow where you use this as your upgrade mechanism for your clone jail, you would create the block clone one, destroy the over, and then now you have a new owner for that. So the reference count would go from 1 to 2 and down to 1 again. And then you discard of the old. So as soon as the old age out of your backups, you would be fine. So you don't have to worry about this. Will the restore require a lot more storage space than the original kind of problem? Which if you get too clever with using block cloning for jails, so that you can have your thin provision jails which look thick provision by just effectively doing a cp-a to install a new jail from the template and rely on every file being block cloned by CP. Yeah, that works, but it also sets you up for the worst case expansion ratio you can imagine, because every jail on restore will be effectively no longer deduplicated. So restoring from backup converts your thin provision jails to thick provision jails. Yeah, you better hope you have lots of storage or not a lot of jails. But if you only use it locally to get your files efficiently from one ZFS dataset
I
to
mean,
another,
only thick in terms of the components
Exactly.
that were changed. It's not
Yes.
the rest of it won't be thick. The rest of it
If
will still
your
be thin.
thick changes are only your real files, which you hopefully keep on a proper data set anyway,
Right. Yeah.
and you're now talking about, yeah, I had a clone and I modified something in slash etc.
So
So I want,
this, yeah, I was just going to say this idea beats Docker by double because
mhm,
Docker relies on what you were saying at the beginning of the conversation, which was an immutable storage that could be wiped out at any point, which of course is true, but but we could defer the deletion of those things with block cloning and just warn the person, hey, you've got some stuff in the wrong spot. So like
yes,
just from a human being point of view, that's pretty great.
yes, it is. The advantage, especially at scale of the Docker approach, or the one I've effectively recreated at the file system level with ZFS, is that it is truly immutable at the kernel level, so it always keeps you honest. Whereas with this approach, you can over time turn your cattle back into pets as you accumulate more and more modified config files. And now you actually have to treat them from an administrative overhead point of view, like a virtual machine, which you now have to run FreeBSD update or whatever, or do a package upgrade and hope that it does the equivalent of etc update and so on. You now have to maintain these modified config files and actually either completely own the files or do a freeway merge on every upgrade. Whereas with the immutable approach, you never have to do a freeway merge. You just have to apply a patch where the definition of patch is not this unified diff, but run these commands, which could be applying a diff, but could also be just add a user, install a package, this kind of stuff, override a file. And the nice thing about this is if you always start from a clean FreeBSD userland as a starting point. So FreeBSD with a patch level, nothing modified. That's your origin snapshot. You take that, mount it a tempfs, copy the files into the tempfs. The modifications you have to do to run your application are very stable. You run pw group add, pw user add, service enable something, and then you run the rc.d script of the jail to start all the services you just enabled. And these are things you only have to write once, and unless your rc.d script gets renamed or something like that, you don't have to touch that on FreeBSD upgrades and probably not even on application upgrades. Whereas with the let's get clever with diffs and forward migrate local changes so that you can effectively have a ZFS rebase command, you now no longer have any guarantees. You have efficiency, you have ultimate flexibility, but you have given up the guarantees of immutability because now your container, thin provisioned or not, is stateful. So it's less of a technical question and more of a design decision what you want.
This is crazy. I cannot wait to write this thing. This is so
Please
fun.
do.
I I I'm so close. I mean, clone and rotate. Since I got my developer to start writing tests, we're using something called shell spec, which is damn brutal. But
Spec or shell check?
shell spec, it's a testing tool. So a call response and make sure that everything comes back correctly. I've got to get version 1.1 released. It's already too good for just me. Um, but yeah, but yeah, rotate and revert just work. You can just keep doing it, and it'll automatically identify when you need a snapshot. It'll snapshot. Revert will do like a new syslog kind of thing to your source, and rotate does what we just described. Take data from the upstream replica, uh, rotate it and replicate it. Except right now, it just ignores the old version. It just renames it and puts it aside. All I have to do is add a function. The rebase function will do the block cloning back. And holy hell, that will be so cool. You could totally upgrade a
And
total system in place. I mean, it wouldn't be, you wouldn't want to go
um,
crazy because
you could
dedupe
go a
is
bit
slow,
crazy.
but
So as long as it's related, you can use ZFS diff. If not, you can do an M tree with strong content hashes and M time and so on to find the diff.
well,
And
why would we need to do that though?
oh, at the ZFS level in the system where you're doing the operation, the data sets are not related. You can't do a ZFS diff between them. So, but you could do something like an M tree or another kind of file system diff to find the identical files and move stuff over. Oh, so that you kind of say, hey, these files, potentially all of them, in this origin, I want that in the other data set. So you compute the checksum of every path, maybe the metadata as well, and then you just copy file range every file where the destination checksum is different from the source, the content, and then apply whatever permission differences there are.
Who's going to help me with my BST can talk?
I'm happy to.
Sure, I'm happy to
This
help
is
you with that.
I don't know if it should. I guess it should just be a lightning talk since I already did Zelta last year. But
No, there is a large enough feature that it's definitely full talk
You
worth of
you can hang
covering.
out there for an hour and talk about all sorts of cool stuff.
You're only supposed to talk like three-fourths of the time and give people a few questions to articulate their confusion.
yeah,
Because this is definitely something which will bend minds out of shape.
yeah. I mean, I think if we give, I mean, we've got enough months to give people some example systems to work with. But I mean, an entire jail. I think the hardest part of it is going to be dealing with you know, for sun mounting because the data's hot. So, oh,
Um,
well, I guess you've already solved those problems with your project. So
yes, I have the
we can put our
solution I
heads
found is
together.
the following. Because my prototype is shell-based, I'm doing it like this. Um, if I'm stopping the jail, I unmount all the file systems for which one of two conditions is true. Either the mount point is exactly the jail path, or the mount point starts with the jail path and a slash. So it's jail path slash something, then it's mounted under there, or it's an exact match. It's not exactly a prefix match, but effectively it's a prefix match at the directory level. So if it gets mounted into the jail, I unmount it on both jail shutdown and to make the jail starting more reliable, because the existing way to do file system mounting via jail.conf, directly via jail.conf, is to just either put a single FS stub line in as jail, I think it's jail.mount something, or it's an external FS stub file. The problem with that approach is that the jail command doesn't truly parse it like the mount command would and apply the idempotency logic which exists in the mount command. it also doesn't just feed the fs stub into the mount command. Instead, it partially re-implements the logic line by line. So it passes an fs stub line and tries to mount the file system. But if the file system is already mounted, that will fail. And all but the most experienced users will be confused by the error message because it's not really self-evident what happens there unless you know this exact problem and how to unbreak it by manually unmounting file systems. So instead, I've
That
written
sounds
a
like
little.
something the jail guy should fix sometime.
Sounds like
That sounds
something the
like
jail
something
guy
that should be
should fix.
fixed.
Yes, it should. In my opinion, all the amount. So, in my opinion, what should happen is that we just generate equivalent FS stub by combining the FS stub you have and the mount points in the configuration. So, if you have a /dev or /ff desk mount implied, just sort the mount points into mount point order. And instead of handling the mounting within the jail command, type it as standard input into the mount command. The mount command already has a flag to read from standard in. So it would actually remove code from the jail command. And has a flag to do the unmount logic where you do a statfs on all file systems, find the mount point, do the matching logic, and then what I'm doing is I'm filtering the output of mount-p and then feed that into the unmount command.
Okay, Jan, for the minutes, what should be fixed?
So the way the jail command handles mounting of file systems is, not to be rude, it's fairly primitive. And the rest of the base system is more intelligent about it. The mount command has mount-a, which will only mount the file systems which are not already mounted, so that you can add a line to fs stub, run mount-a
That's
again,
cool.
and it
Oh, that's great.
idempotently will only mount the file systems which are needed. It uses a fairly good heuristic by looking at the device mounted and if it's a mount point at all, which is probably good enough. But to make it even more reliable, what I'm doing is that I'm in my jail exec.prepare hooks have a hook which just unmounts everything mounted currently into the jail path, only to then remount. Yes, it takes a few milliseconds, but and you potentially want to have the file system by default mounted, but it means that I always have a clean environment. I guess you could make it a mount.clean to enable this feature so it's opt-in. So
Yeah,
that
so
if
it
you
would
don't,
want something not default for that.
yeah, exactly. You can't make it default because of the polar violation, but it could be a one-liner to opt-in, just mount.clean or something. And I don't see a reason why, especially now that we have includes, you can't put it in your site-specific default include file you include into every jail, or you make it a default setting to be inherited. So it's either way one line to opt into this behavior. And then if you have a stuck mount point, which normally would block the jail, it gets cleaned up every time you attempt to start the jail, which makes it so much more pleasant to write the kind of Docker file equivalents of your jail manager or just do it in plain jail.conf. Because otherwise, anytime you have like, oh yeah, /dev is still mounted, now you can't start your jail.
Right.
And then you have to manually find, oh, how far did I get? Do I have a /dev fd? Oh, if I first have to unmount this, and then this, and then this, and then this. Now I can try again.
Okay.
And
What was the flag
automating this
for?
away,
Yeah, go ahead.
the flag does not yet exist.
No, the flag
Mounted
for
clean.
tab separated syntax. I think you can do
Uh, so you can have the mount command output an FS step
Oh, FS.
of the currently mounted file systems. I read that with shell
Okay.
build-ins, parsing
Got
it
it.
enough to filter out the ones which I want to unmount, and then I feed that as standard
Nice.
input into
Thank
the
you.
unmount command via a shell script.
Okay, cool.
I'm happy to share that code.
Well, cool. Sounds like there's some work to do all around.
Very, very excited.
Anything else at this time?
I'm adding the dash dash Yule command to make the output red and green.
Thanks, Daniel.
Uh-huh.
You're welcome.
Awesome.
Maybe if we look into the Unicode specification for a nice little snowflake emoji,
Oh dear.
to
No,
sprinkle
not
into the
bad.
command line output. I'm pretty sure you will find some jingle bells and maybe a Christmas tree in there as well.
Love it.
Daniel, would you like the honors?
Like and subscribe.
Thank you, everyone. Happy holidays. I'm sure there will be calls of some form next week, every week. Take care.
Take care.